Good evening and welcome. This evening, we are delighted to host Her Excellency Tzipi Hotovely, the Israeli ambassador to the Court of St. James. The ambassador joined us as we look forward to Yomrush Line on Sunday. And just to plug that on Sunday evening, I will be in conversation with Nadia Cohen, the widow of Eli Cohen, the Mossad operative who penetrated the heart of the Syrian establishment, who was captured and executed in May 1965. And Nadia continues to campaign for the return of his remains. Of course, on behalf of everyone here, we extend condolences to the country and all the families who died in last week's terrible tragedy at Meron. Our thoughts are with you all at this terrible time, as are our prayers for the physical recovery and emotional healing of all those affected. Tzipi Hotovely is a high flyer. A successful law student and editor of the Bar-Ilan Journal of Law, she qualified as a corporate lawyer, became a popular journalist and commentator. She was elected to the 2009 Knesset, aged 31. I first met Her Excellency when she visited Australia in June 2010. I showed her around the Great Synagogue, and then she joined us for dinner with the half-dozen Australian girls who are contestants in Israel's prestigious Chidon HaTanakh, the annual Bible quiz. She was engaging and inspired the girls, a graduate of Bnei Akiva, of Bruriah Seminary and Sherut Le'umi. She has since served in a number of senior appointments, including Deputy Minister of Science and Technology and Deputy Foreign Minister at a time when there was no Foreign Minister other than the PM. As such, she was designated Israel's top diplomat. And as such, despite being Israel's youngest ambassador to the Court of St. James, she is, by this metric, also its most senior qualified. As a plug to all those involved in Jewish youth movements, I'd like to highlight that Yehuda Avner and Daniel Taub, like Tzipi Hotovely, have been proud Bnei Akiva activists, and Mark Regev's background was Habonim. It has been a strange time to take up the post. The ambassador presented her credentials in August in the middle of a pandemic. Israel's successes and challenges in the pandemic have been at the forefront of international reportage. Internally, Israel is struggling to find a prime minister who can establish a working majority coalition government. More about that later. And externally, at the end of last year, Israel signed the Abraham Accords and is normalizing some new relationships in the Middle East. But the new boss in the White House comes with new policies. Excellency, we thank you for joining us, and we look forward to discussing all of these with you. Microphones are muted at the moment, but everyone is welcome to send me questions through the chat. Ambassador, welcome.
Thank you for the warm hospitality. I can't wait till we will meet in the synagogue, because Kinloss Synagogue is so famous. I would say it's an icon. It's a British Jewish icon. And one of the things I feel bad more than anything about this year is I couldn't celebrate with you with the great Bnei Akiva prayer in Kinloss. All those years in the past, ambassadors, it was one of the highlights. So I really hope, Bezrat Hashem, next year, we're all going to enjoy the great prayer of Kinloss together with the Bnei Akiva youth group.
Bezrat Hashem, even before next Yom HaAtzmaut. So people wonder, what is the role of an ambassador?
This is the first time I've been asked this question. I think for being ambassador in London, it has a multiple positions. For the first, you need to work on the security level of your country, because Britain, as you know, is a global player. It's not just a regular country. And even though you're in the post-Brexit era, Britain still plays a major role in Europe as part of the E3, as part of the triple strong and big countries in Europe, France, Germany, and Britain. Another thing is that Britain is part of the Security Council at the UN. So it has a very strong voice on the international arena, on the multilateral organizations. Another thing is history. that takes us back to the Balfour Declaration. So there's a lot of history here in this country that we need to preserve. And last but not least is the great connection to the Jewish community, which I found personally as a religious woman, as a woman of faith, as a woman that was fortunate to be representative also of the Israeli government in the past as a diaspora minister. I think this connection is really important for the people in Israel as much as it's important to the people of Britain. And I think the bridge between communities, this is the role of a diplomat. A diplomat is building bridge between countries, between communities, between people. And I really hope to do my job well.
We wish you every luck in that. You come from a political background, which is not normal for the ambassadors to this country. Your predecessor was a spokesperson for the Prime Minister, but you've been in the Knesset and a very senior level. How does that affect your job, and how does that affect the way that you're perceived by other people?
I think that for me, it's a great opportunity because, again, the thing that I enjoy more than anything is to work for my country, is to be a public servant in the higher level of this world. And when you're representing a party, and you're representing a sector, but when I have this flag behind me now, it's representing the entire amazing miracle of the state of Israel. So first of all, for me, on a personal level, it's a great opportunity to speak on behalf of the state of Israel, which is a great thing. I think many people, I met many communities the last 6 months. Unfortunately, it was all Zoom, not real meetings, but we were trying to reach out many communities and the different dominations in the country. I think many people still see me as a politician. And it's a good opportunity to say, even though I was in the political system, even though I still have leadership aspirations, because I'm very young and I'm sure that I will serve my country as far as I can in any, in the different things and different positions. I came here really to be a diplomat. I leave my ideology in my heart. It beats, it's part of who I am. I think when you're a representative of Israel, you need to represent everyone, not just the party that I was playing the political game in. And I really hope people will give a real chance to hear my voice, because, as you said, I'm also representing new generation in Israel. The average age of ambassadors here was 60. I'm 42. I'm a mother of young 3 daughters that are learning here in a Jewish education. I think and I'm the first woman as well. So altogether, I think it gives us something new about and refreshing about Israeli voice. And I really hope to bring it.
So I have no doubt that I have leadership aspirations is the headline news that everybody is going to take out of what you've already said. But what influenced you to get involved in public life?
I think it was a combination between the education I received at home. I grew up in a very Zionist family. I always like to say that my grandfather left his home. My grandparents, they came from Soviet Union. And basically, they were part of a very unique group in the Jewish history that struggled to open Iron Gate, the Iron Curtain, as you call it. And I think that he struggled to go out of the Soviet Union, even though they never suffered there. There was no anti-Semitism, had a very good life, very high level, high life, big, I would say, in any level of life, he had a great life. And they just built a new house. My mother always tells me as a child, she remembers it was a new house, beautiful new house. And once they received the certificate, they just left everything, came with a small suitcase. And my grandfather's friends couldn't understand. His name is Michael. He's 83. And they said, Michael, why are you leaving? We love you. The Jews here are well respected. They're loved. And he said, because I'm Jewish and Israel is my home. And I think this story is part of my identity. The fact that Jews belong to Israel and we want all Jews to feel connected to this amazing country. And I think that it was part of what we got from our parents in our DNA, in our family DNA. Work for your country. Don't work just for your career. Don't do just things to earn money, or all those new values. Those new values were not part of my family values. My family values were volunteer, be a public servant, do something for your country. And I was very fortunate to be given the opportunity to serve my country, to serve my country in the parliament and in the government.
And outside of your family, who've been your main influences and inspirations?
My family mainly, but what was the other question? Were there
outside of your family, who have been your influences and inspirations, who helped shape your
Let me tell you something I will tell you something not popular. In the educational system I grew up, it wasn't very popular to become politician. So I cannot say that I was inspired from school, because school always wanted us to be doctors, lawyers, the regular professions. Politics was something that only bad people did. So I would say that this perception of it's not a job for a nice Jewish girl, I cannot give the credit to the educational system. I can give the credit to my family that really encouraged me to do this. I was very brave by doing it, because I was joining a secular party. I was the first religious woman to become a minister, as a representative of all women, the religious women. They were never having a spot in the religious parties, but in the secular party, I achieved this high position of being a minister. So my story is quite unique. So of course, many people gave me a lot during my education, but I cannot say that politics was driven from any kind of educational route that I've taken.
Right. And in terms of hashkafa, the Zionist vision that inspired you, where does that come from?
I think it's so basic. I don't know where to start. Starting from Herzl, I guess. It's so basic. Like for me, thinking about my life without Zionism, it's really impossible. Right. So the only thing I can say that I learned for many years, maybe it's something that I don't know how much the British people are familiar, but I quoted this wonderful Jewish leader when I became a deputy foreign minister. My first speech at the foreign ministry was about the first Rashi on the Torah. And it shocked everyone. Why is a diplomat using Rashi? Is it a new way to do hasbara? It was a whole big fuss around it. Why she's quoting Rashi? And the truth is, I wasn't just quoting Rashi. I was also quoting a great Jewish scholar, a French scholar. His name was Rabbi Yehuda Ashkenazi. He's a French big Jewish leader. And for many years, I was fortunate to be inspired by his students, his direct students. And we learned in small groups for many years his great philosophy. Just now in Israel, his books are starting to be published. And I can highly recommend about the way he gives his amazing parshanut for the Torah. And so he was a great inspiration for me.
So we look forward to sharing your chavrusa with Rav Ashkenazi with us in Kinloss. But today's news from Israel has been a deadline for Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu to form a new government has expired, putting his political future in question. That's the commentary on Ynet. Says the president, Reuven Rivlin, may now ask a rival to try to assemble a coalition. And Yair Lapid from the centrist Yesh Atid party and Naftali Bennett, head of the right-wing Yamina party, spoke to him on Wednesday morning, and there remains a risk of the country having to hold a general election for the 5th time in only 2 years. Ambassador, what's going on?
I wish we knew. Well, the truth is that this is one of the biggest political crises Israel has experienced since it was established. For the last 70 years, we had an election, average time, once in 3 years, 3.5 years. Or you win or you lose. And if no one wins or loses, you go to a unity government. This was our history, our political history. Never in history, there was a point where a personal politics replaced ideology. And I think what you can see at the moment is a very personal politics, something that is not about ideas. It's not about ideology. It's not about right or left, the way we're used to divide politicians. It's more a personal, ego that is now running around many people that could have been being called the right-wingers, but they are not willing to share coalition with Netanyahu. So the results, the very clear results of the election were that, as the president said, when people came to him the first time, there is a whole process. You have 120 seats in the Knesset, as you all know. You need to have 61 in order to form a government, or at least 61. And he basically said to all the participants, all the people that are playing the game, he basically said to everyone, you don't have a government. None of the sides has a real government. So even today, when we have this second option, we're not speaking about forming a government, because the cards on the table, including the numbers, are speaking about minority government. In the past, there was a minority government in Israel, but it's not a practical way to do things. It's not a practical way to, struggle with, deal with the challenges that Israel has. And it's definitely not the recommended way to form a government by having minority government, not having a real majority in the parliament, because we're not like in America, where the president can do foreign policy, Congress is doing internal things. We don't have this kind of model. The government is based on the Knesset. And without having a majority in the Knesset, it's very difficult to function. And the only thing I can say, I'm not happy with it. I'm not happy with the fact that, as much as we love democracy, that we keep on doing election again and again. And I cannot tell you how it's going to end. It can end with another election. It can end with some kind of minority government. It can end with another option of bringing it back to the Knesset and trying to form a government with some people that will change their minds about the process, like we've seen one of the members in Yamina that just announced he's not going to go with the Yair Lapid government. So it's very complicated. I cannot tell you what's the end game, unfortunately, but I'm sharing with you, I'm sure one thing we all share, to have a stable government is the best thing for Israel.
Please God. So you're appointed by the Prime Minister, but do you serve the Prime Minister or the Knesset or the President as ambassador?
Well, like all ambassadors, I serve the country. I serve the government of Israel. The definition of a diplomat is we serve the policy of the Israeli government.
Is it harder to do that when the government is unstable and when the Prime Minister himself is being challenged even for his own integrity in the courts?
It has two sides. One side is the pandemic. Because of the pandemic, we had many cooperations around health issues. And I can tell you that it was, as much as it's going to sound surprising, it was a wonderful, wonderful time for Israel, because Israel was only being covered in the headlines by good news. We became vaccination nation, a role model, a country that shared practices about a very important issue. The pandemic was global, and the people understand that we need to share practices in order to succeed and to win. And Israel became a good test case. As you know, everything is open now. Israel is back to life, and it was wonderful. So in a way, it didn't disturb the cooperation on health issues. We did great things in the last 6 months with the British government. But from the other hand, when I see I just met Liz Truss today, the Secretary of Trade, and she really wants to come to Israel. She wants to visit, and we really need her to have a counterpart. So sometimes some of the senior people here need to have functioning government in order to create this bilateral close relations, like Britain and Israel sharing many things, and we want to move forward with the great bilateral relations and do more. So I would say there is difficulties, many, but there are also good opportunities that are coming from the Abraham Accords and from the Vaccination Nation. So this coin has two sides.
Excellent. So Michael Gove was in Israel a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
And a very senior government representative making an overseas trip when many people are not traveling overseas. I mean, we want to get over to Israel, but he got there. I mean, what he was discussing the vaccination passport and what lessons have been learned in Israel over the pandemic. How has the Israeli health service coped? Are the lessons that we can learn from the Israeli experience?
I think, first of all, about the Gove's visit, it was a very successful one. He met the Prime Minister, the Health Minister, and the Foreign Minister. And he also saw, he was watching a practical checkups in Namal Teufa Ben Gurion, in our airport. He saw how we do the fast, speedy checks that check if people, in a few minutes, you can have the results of if people are carrying the virus or not. So I think it was a very successful visit. It was about traveling corridors, which is something we all want to have very soon. I know it's going to be one of your questions. When can you come and travel to Israel? I would love to see all the people that are interested to come, that can come in the summer. I really hope I can promise this, but I cannot promise. I can only say we're trying hard to make it to the summer. The Prime Minister was also discussing with Secretary Gove, with Minister Gove, about the options of creating factories to producing vaccines. I think today we all know that the only way to get out of the pandemic is vaccination. There is no really other option, because lockdown is not an option to our global economies. And we need to see people getting back to work, getting back to normal, kids in school. In order to achieve that, you need to have the majority of the population being vaccinated. And this is what made the Israeli story successful, because we have a digital healthcare system. And it made it very easy to reach out to people. The fact that we're a small country, I guess, helps as well. So,
right, so it's been mostly good news, and you know,
yes,
we as a community have felt vicarious pride in that, or real pride. But there has been challenging publicity about the vaccination of Palestinians, and you know, I'd like to ask you what's been offered, and given, you know, you talked about vaccination being the solution. We know that poverty and poor living conditions make it harder to manage the virus. So what are we doing to help eradicate the virus across our border?
I think that let's focus on vaccination that was offered to the Palestinians, because there are two different questions, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so when the pandemic started, of course, every country purchased as much vaccines as the population needs. And sometimes, you know, people outreach to me and they like, is Israel selling vaccines? Is Israel, you know, exporting vaccines? Now people are asking, is Israel helping to India? So we all want to be do-gooders and to help to the entire world. We want to reach out now. We're now sending delegations to India to help in the crisis. So we really want to help everyone. But it is important to know that when it comes to our neighbors, the Palestinians, it was their choice that they made after we offered our help to have their own vaccination program. Now, according to former and historic international agreements, the Palestinians can control their health system, and they can decide whether they would like to get Israel's help, the WHO help, or other friends. And one of the things it's important to know, they refused even to accept the help of their friends in the Gulf. There was a big delegation that was coming from the UAE. It was trying to supply vaccines to the Palestinians. They refused to accept. So they made a decision about the way they want to take care of the population. In a certain point, we decided that it's of course, it's in our interest that everyone that comes into Israel will be vaccinated. So all Palestinian workers, 100,000 people, were receiving the Israeli vaccines, because it was part of you know, the working process. They go back and forth. And when it came to the medical teams, we also offered our help, and they received it. So we offered our help. In a certain point, the Palestinians choose to have their own vaccination program. And of course, it's important to remember that when it comes to Gaza, it's a terror organization that is holding the Gaza Strip. So it's not in our, I would say, in our responsibility to take care of the Gaza people.
Right, but we have offered the Palestinian Authority. Israel has offered the
Yes.
Palestinian Authority cooperation,
Yes.
and is still open to that if they ask for it.
Yes, because we work on a daily basis when it comes to security issues. It's a cooperation that's based, you know, everything almost that is happening there is shared with the Israeli authorities. So I really don't think it was like they shouted and screamed, didn't get help. So that, like the misperception that they were trying to create. I really think it was about having them autonomy about this issue. which we should respect, I think.
How do you characterize the relationship between Israel and the UK?
Excellent, really excellent. It's a very deep partnership on security and defense. We share intelligence on the highest level. And when I say that, I mean you are our second partner after the US. And it means a lot. And specifically now, the governments cooperate very well. There is even a personal friendship between Prime Minister Johnson and Prime Minister Netanyahu. And the only thing I can say is we can move forward a little bit with trade, because Britain is our third trade partner, but our trade agreement is based very much on old economy. We can do more ingredients of technology, cyber technology, all the things that Israel is a world power.
And do you think Brexit is going to create greater opportunities for trade?
Well, I think that it was the British people that made this decision, but it is
we're
in
all
a
waiting
sense.
for somebody to tell us why it's good news, though. So,
well, I think on vaccination it was good news. You wouldn't like to be in the European Union, but I think that what Britain is doing at the moment, it's building its new, I would say, friends around the global world. You can see now they signed an agreement with Australia and New Zealand. They want to have more like-minded countries that are strong in technology. So I think Israel has a lot to offer on this level.
Right. What's your assessment of the Anglo Jewish community? I mean, what do you report back to the foreign ministry about Anglo Jewry?
Well, first of all, I met great Jewish people that are really, really Zionist. I'm very happy for that. I am concerned from the fact some young people refuse to meet me. And I really want to strong the connection with the young generation, the younger generation. I think everyone in the community loves Israel, loves to come to Israel. But maybe we need to work on projects that will build, I would say, a new kind of way to interact with Israeli people, because as one of the Jewish people here said, Israel is very much America-oriented, and it doesn't know enough about the great legacy of Jews in Britain. And I see that as my duty to bring this voice back home and to create some bridges about this issue. But I'm very open also to suggestions. So on this field, I'm still learning.
Do you think there is a growing separation between diaspora Jewish identity and Israeli identity?
I'm not sure I understand the question. What do you mean? Like, can you try and explain what is the thing you think is growing?
So Israel's now had 7 decades of existence and has grown up and raised generations of Israelis who have their sense of self and placement. And at the same time, there's been a huge Zionist success within some diaspora communities, but at the same time, other parts of diaspora have just moved on being Jewish communities in their host countries. And many Jews might question their Zionist commitment now, which was different immediately after the Second World War and the Shoah. So, is Israel moving one way and Jewish communities in diaspora, doing their own thing a little bit?
I think we can't move in different directions because we need each other. I really think that it's a dangerous process if it's happening, and we need to make sure that it won't happen. This is our duty to make sure that Jews will feel connected. I don't think that anyone would have loved to live in a world where Israel doesn't exist. This is why I think Israel should be a consensus issue among Jews. I think that many people confuse between criticism about Israel's government's policy, which is totally legitimate. And we're all coming from a country that loves to criticize, and everyone has its own opinion, and we all love to share it. But we need to love each other, and we need to respect each other, and we need to give space in our Jewish tent to whoever wants to say his opinion. But I think everyone should love and really appreciate the privileged generation we live in that has Israel. And we cannot just throw away this miracle.
That's your speech next Yom Ha'atzmaut in Kinloss.
We'll get a new one.
Yeah, that's a great message. I mean, just generally, you spoke a little bit about the about Startup Nation and the vaccination and things like that. But what is the good news that's coming out of Israel? What should we be celebrating at the moment?
There are so many things. I don't know where to start. You mean on technology?
Yeah.
Well, I want to start with something I think people don't notice, but I think my personal story as a first generation born in Israel, and the fact I am where I am, and the fact you can be even first generation in Israel, like many Russian immigrants, and become a minister, even a foreign minister, I think it shows a lot about social mobility in Israel. It's easy to speak about technology, but I actually want to speak about the human spirit of Israel. The human spirit of Israel is really to give everyone his moment, to bring his spark, and to create those great success that are not based on people who have background with money, even on the different types of education. I think today Israel gives real, true opportunities to all groups in the society. We can do better, like every country, but I have seen many countries around the world. Very few are giving social mobility easy like Israel. And we should be proud for that, because it really creates this melting pot of Jews came from all around the world to their home, something that is very successful. And I think it's a very unique thing about the Israeli spirit. I think when it comes to medical inventions, and when it comes to technological solutions to one of the world's biggest problems, which is fresh air, fresh water, all those things. This country is going to host COP26, the climate change summit. And Israel is really leading country when it comes to helping developing world on those issues of having fresh air and fresh water and food security, all those things that all the international community has been dealing with. And cybersecurity, of course, which is becoming bigger and bigger now that all our information is in machines, and we need to protect ourselves. We need to protect our bank accounts. FinTech is very big. There's so much going on, really, but I think that what's really fascinating is also the Jewish Renaissance. I can see many young people are interested in Jewish studies. There is a great project in Israel. It's called Mechinot Kedam Tzvayot, a pre-army Mechinot. And it's like a 1 year, like in Britain, you have the gap year. Hopefully kids will come to Israel now that they can. And in Israel, what this year is doing gives many kids the opportunity to learn about Zionism, Jewish identity. I think it's great. It's for girls, for boys, and everyone is really getting a lot out of this social project, which is the Mechinot.
Where's the peace process at?
We reach already peace with 4 countries, so it's a lot for 1 year to achieve. I think that it's a true peace. Some people would like to say that it's just normalization. I think it's downgrading the achievement. It's a really new chapter with the Arab world. I think when I came here, the first meetings I hold was with the Arab ambassadors, the Egyptian, the Jordanian, the Gulf countries, the Emirati ambassador, the Bahraini ambassador, the Moroccan ambassador. And they were so excited. We really felt it's an historic moment, and we celebrated it. And as we can see today that the embassy is already working, trade is happening, and tourism is happening. 70,000 Israelis flew in between lockdowns just to experience this amazing peace that came. So we really need to celebrate that, because it shows also on the shift in a paradigm. For many years, we felt like the only issue in the Middle East is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We quite ignored all the other things. And Israel, for many years, we were trying to say, we are willing to sign peace agreement with everyone that wants to live peacefully with us. And we have a proven record. Egypt, Jordan, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco. And I really hope everyone will join the circle of peace. I think it's wonderful. And if one day the Palestinians will be willing to have peace with us, I'm sure there will be peace.
The change of regime in America has led to a new language about Iran and an approach to Iran. Where do you see that going?
We have a very close dialogue with the Americans at the moment. We just had our head of Mossad and head of National Security Council visiting Washington. So we have a very intimate discourse with the Americans. Our message is very simple. It's not secret. We think we need to prevent from Iran have nuclear abilities, nuclear weapons. And at the moment, it doesn't look like going back to the agreement will take us to a better place, because since the agreement was signed, Iran was moving fast forward to reach its nuclear weapons and never stopped to go and try to reach it. And no one says different, by the way. No one is saying the agreement stopped Iran. No one is saying that it really managed to do what it was aimed to do. So we have a close dialogue with our friends around the world, and we want to make sure that the result, the end game, will be that Iran will never achieve nuclear weapons.
And Israel is doing what it can to stop that from happening, it would appear.
We really think that this is a real threat to the whole Western civilization, not just to Israel.
So if people have got questions for Ambassador Hotovely, please do put them in the chat. I've got one here from Harvey, who says, following your passion for diaspora Jewish unity and Israel, how would you feel about diaspora Jews having some kind of say in Israeli elections?
You mean voting or just giving an opinion?
So, you need, right, everybody gets to express opinions, but, maybe if we voted, it would make a difference.
I really think that in order to vote in, in election, you need to live in Israel. And I have a lot of respect to people that want to express their opinions and to say what they think could have been better. But I'll share with you my own story. I mean, I was planning to have a doctorate studies of law, and I was planning to be not even a backbencher, I would say, like someone that sits in the back, not playing in the field, and have his criticism about the political system because it's the easiest. But you need to pay the price of the choices you make, because eventually, if you're voting and what comes out of it is a war, what comes out of it is economic crisis, you need to be there to experience the results of the thing that you're voting for. So I really think the Jewish voice should be sound about everything, including Israeli politics. You can say everything, but I really think that in order to vote, you need to live in the country.
This one just comes up from iPad. The Jordanians have said this week that no Jews should be permitted to go onto Har HaBayit. What are your thoughts on that?
Israel's government's policy, again, it's important to remember, I'm representing the government's policy. The government's policy is keep the status quo on Temple Mount. We have certain times that Jews can come to Temple Mount, and it's not a secret that this is the holiest place to the Jewish people. So it looks to me like if you're coming from democratic values like Israel, you must have freedom of religion. As we of course allow to all religions to come, tourists from all religions are coming and practicing their religion on the mountain. So,
right,
Jews cannot be excluded.
Jews cannot be excluded. Do you think that this comes from Tony? Do you think British school trips to Israel from Jewish schools should be encouraged to go into Har HaBayit?
I don't know what kind of trips, what's the age of the kids. It really depends. I mean, you know what? Just bring them to the Kotel, bring them to Israel. I mean, it's really about experiencing Israel. I really think that the most important thing, if you're asking me, again, as a diaspora former foreign minister, I think the most important thing is to experience Israel for a while, not just for a trip, not just to come and, visit a relative, to really live there just for a few months, a gap year, to be part of some kind of program, to study in university, to study in yeshiva, midrasha, whatever. I really think it's not about just seeing the famous sites, because you can see all the famous sites, but you don't get it. You need to be there. You need to be there for a while. And I think that more than anything, if you're going to ask me what's my dream, that we will have the same language. One of the things I think is creating a barrier, actually, is the Hebrew language. The fact that when I want, like my daughter, to speak to her British Jewish friend, she needs to learn English, and they cannot share the same language as Jewish people. We read from the same Bible, read from the same Siddur, but Jews from all around the world cannot speak the same language. I think we should do more about Hebrew study.
So one of the questions that we face here is the Jewish communities in Argentina learn wonderful Ivrit. In South Africa, they learn good Ivrit, and they almost speak English in South Africa. Why is it that our community finds it so difficult to get its head around Ivrit?
This is a question to you. I mean, I cannot answer this. This is the truth. The only thing I can say is it's very difficult to learn a language that you don't practice, because you're surrounded by English speakers, of course. So I can only give you a good excuse. Why not? But I wish people could have had more time to practice their Hebrew, to have their Israeli colleagues, friends, to practice with them Hebrew. Sometimes people say that we should do project of chavruta, of people teaching each other. The British and Americans will teach Israelis English, and Israelis will teach them Hebrew. I don't know how it can work, but I really think that the fact that we don't speak the same language is a real barrier, because, as you know, not all Israelis can have, a conversation that expresses everything they want to say in English, and definitely not every Jew can have this conversation in Hebrew. I don't know if you agree with me. If you do, think together with me what to do about it.
I'm in favor of us learning. You talked about technology and medicine and various things that Israel has exported. Let's talk television. Whoever imagined that Israel would be exporting shtisel to England? What do you make of that?
I think it's great. I think it's wonderful. I think culture is a great way to create bonding between people, to speak to the hearts. Just something that you learn as time goes. We admire the brain, we admire intelligence, intellectuality, all those great things. But when real things happen, it happens with the heart. So I think culture is very important. People should love what Israel is creating, and we really need to be there on the cultural ground, and television is doing it. The fact that Israel is bringing, those interesting stories from like inside life of like Jewish ultra-Orthodox people, like in Shtisel or Fauda, gives very interesting aspect of the conflict from a very personal level. And you can identify with many of the people, or you can ask questions, but it's coming from a cultural stage. It's amazing. I really think it's one of the Israel's big success. And I can explain, because Jews were always good storytellers. And by making good television, you need to have a good story. So I think we are good storytellers.
It's definitely coming across. And the Israeli film festivals, when we've been able to have them, have actually been outstanding events. Do you see Israel becoming increasingly polarized internally, religious and secular?
I don't see it. The truth is, it's the opposite. I think because I'm experiencing many people becoming more traditional, I think many people are not ideologically, they don't have this passion of being anti-religious. It's a minority, it's a very vocal minority, but I think most of the people just want to live peacefully with each other. We serve in the army together. We pay taxes together. We want to have the same future to our children, which is a flourishing country. And I think many people want to be more close to Jewish tradition in Israel than ever.
That's hopeful news. Do you think that Israel is able to remain a secular democracy?
A what? I didn't understand.
A secular democracy.
I don't think this is the identity of the country. The country is Jewish and democratic. Jewish values are part of our fundamental rules. Like, this is part of our, like, unofficial constitution. It says time after time, Jewish and democratic and Jewish. There is a whole big debate what it means and where the values are and what's more stronger. But Israel was never meant to be a secular democracy free of identity. Israel is a Jewish state and a democratic state together. And I think the fact it's a Jewish state, you can feel it when you walk in the street, when you hear the Hebrew, when you have the Jewish holidays as the official. Just when I came here, look, I want to share with you my personal feeling. When I came here, I didn't feel the Jewish holidays because I realized how much this country is Christian. Is Britain secular? Of course. But it's so Christian. You can feel Christmas, you can feel Easter, you can feel Thanksgiving. You need to be in Golder Screen in order to feel the Jewish holidays. So I'm just saying that every country has its like rhythm of life. And the rhythm of life in Israel is definitely Jewish. So I'm just saying it doesn't have to be religious but it's for sure, it's Jewish. It's very warm and Jewish, I think, the temperament of the country. And the majority of the people, it's important to remember, the minority are secular. The majority are Masorti, traditional, which includes major people in the periphery of Israel, the Mizrahi people, the all Masortiim. How do you think the Likud gets million voters, people that care about Jewish identity? Because the Mizrahi people are very much into Jewish Masortiyut and traditional connection to Jewish life. So I would say this perspective about Israel as secular is not accurate.
Right. You talk about us being a Christian country here. Even if you can't come into Kinloss, I invite you to drive by, because I think we must be the only shul in London which happens to have a Happy Ramadan sign outside it. Put up by the Iriyah rather than by us, but it's representative of the country. So I've got a question here from somebody who's contemplating aliyah, who is, it's a great thing to be thinking about. But he says that it's very difficult to do it, and he wonders what can be done to encourage olim who have no family support in Israel.
I would love to invite him to a meeting, because one of the things I very much want to hear is, I'm curious, actually I'm going to give you back this as a question. I was very much involved with Nefesh B'Nefesh, the American project. Mm-hmm. The idea of Nefesh B'Nefesh was very simple. The biggest barrier of making aliyah is not the idea of living in Israel. Everyone loves the idea of living in Israel. But when it comes to the practical level, you need to find a job, you need to find schools that are suitable to your kids, you need to find a community, you need to find a place to live, and you need to struggle with bureaucracy. So they made this research. What are the main barriers for olim from America? And they ended up with this list of things. And they said, we are going to be the family support. We are going to create this network that gives everyone that wants to make aliyah, just come and register in Nefesh B'Nefesh. We will do everything for you. Now, one of the people that was my advisors in the foreign ministry, she was a wonderful woman. Her name was Zahavi. She was American, born in LA, in Los Angeles. And she made aliyah when she was 18, met her husband here, got married, lives in a frat, and has a great family here. And now she sees what's the next generation is going through when they're coming with Nefesh B'Nefesh. So she said, this is such a luxury aliyah. I made aliyah with no friends, with no connections, just coming here with this Zionist dream, having this great spirit of a young person wants to live his life in Israel, but I didn't have this support. So nefesh b'nefesh, I think, is the greatest success of giving network of support. And we need to have a British nefesh b'nefesh, or to make like another section of nefesh b'nefesh that will do work in Britain. So the only question is why it didn't happen, because nefesh b'nefesh is a great role model. So maybe you can help me with that. Why the nefesh b'nefesh role model cannot work here?
So we definitely had somebody from England who was working with nefesh b'nefesh, who helped my daughter when she made aliyah. But she made it from Australia, so it's possible that she got in there and went into Sherut Lumi. But I think support for Olim is good. When I made aliyah in the 90s, we had the zechuyot and discounts on refrigerators and houses, if only we could afford them. But there's a lot of bureaucracy and red tape still.
I agree, but I'm saying again, part of those organizations is to help in cutting bureaucracy. So I'm telling you, people that are using their help, they feel like they're being supported with someone local who takes care of them. So this is what we need. We need this mediator that is doing this work, and they're doing amazing work.
Right, in its own way and in its own day, and it was very different. We had the Chevrat Olim Britannia, the British Olim Society.
Very good.
That worked specifically on that.
So you see, this is the job of the Jewish agency, like on a formal level. But I'm very much interested to know where are the barriers and what we can do, because sometimes, you know, the state organs are doing a great job. Sometimes we need to have the help of the private sector. So.
Yeah. I definitely found working with Miscarriage has been a lot easier now than it was 30 years ago. They improved that a lot. Does anybody have any more questions? I've been asked by Richard if you could define Mizrahi people. You talked about the religious values of the Mizrahi people in Israel.
Oh, people that are originally from Arab countries.
There you are, Richard. What are you most looking forward to this year?
Meet people. Host people in my house, to enjoy conferences and get together, having Shabbat meals with people, all those things we couldn't do during lockdown. I have very, very simple aspirations at the moment, just to meet people.
It was so wonderful in Sydney. You came and we just invited you for dinner, and you sat down with these girls, and it was fabulous.
Exactly. It was really.
They could not imagine that they were suddenly sitting down with a member of the Knesset suddenly that evening, and how engaging you were.
Thank you very much.
I felt very special.
Thank you very much. I also felt it was very special. It was unforgotten. And one of the things I really enjoyed when I came here was to do the real limud, because limud in Australia is just a duplication of the real limud that was created here. So I was really enjoying the intellectual debate and the spirit, the British spirit of having challenges and questions. Last question maybe for you, if it's okay, just to give you my wish. You asked me what's my wish. So how to outreach the young generation? Because I can really feel how much, does Kinlos has a program for young professionals? Can you help me to?
We're working on trying to get something for young professionals, and it's definitely a priority for as we're able to get out and engage. We've got a young business network that meets occasionally, that was meeting occasionally till we closed down. But people are wanting to do it a bit broader than just within the Beit Knesset itself. I mean, people are wanting things that are broader than that. So
just if you anything that I can do to host in my house or to interact with young people, and because I think the generation that really cares about Israel, it's really, really strong and amazing. And I think the people that, as you said, experienced the 6 Days War, still remember stories from the Holocaust. they have a different perspective about this miracle. And we need to have that to the young generation. They need to not to take Israel for granted. We need to be grateful about it every day. I said when I was a member of Knesset that we should say Tfilah L'Shlom HaMdina every day, not just on Shabbat. Like every day to celebrate it, to say every day this miracle needs to have special preserving from Hashem. I really felt like that. I want to say all the time Tfilah L'Shlom HaMdina.
And we look forward to you reading it in Kinloss.
Ah, that will be wonderful.
That would be great.
We had a very funny thing this Shabbat. My husband went to shul for the first time because we were in lockdown. We did a little synagogue in our house, just two of us, yeah. And he went for the first time, and they offered him the ambassador's chair, and he said, "No, it's my wife. I can sit here in the back." So they need to have a new ambassador's chair. The St. John's Wood Synagogue always had the ambassador.
St. John's Wood, yeah.
Yes, so
you got the chief rabbi on one side, the ambassador on the other side.
Yes, I won't be privileged to have that, but I can always come to Kinloss and to meet the community.
We look forward to that.
I'm really looking forward. I'm really looking forward.
So, Ambassador, thank you for sharing so much of your time on a very busy time in the world of an Israeli diplomat, and for being so warm and helpful with your answers. And we look forward to meeting up with you in real life soon and in good health.
Amen.
Do you have a Yomrush Line message just to share with us to finish?
Yes. Israel's foreign ministries, one of the first things I started as a deputy foreign minister was to move embassies to Jerusalem. And people said, why does it make a difference? Why it's such a big deal? And I said, because behind the refusal, the international refusal to have embassies in Jerusalem, there is something very deep. Because why should a country care to locate its embassy where the country defines its capital? No one says Israel doesn't have 3,000 years of connection. No one says it's not the capital. They're coming to meet the prime minister in Jerusalem, the parliament in Jerusalem. So what's the story? So I would say Jerusalem is the whole thing. When you declare and recognize the Jewish connection to Jerusalem, you erased all those stories about colonialism, about Jews coming from Europe just because they were refugees from the Holocaust. You really erased all those false narratives. When you recognize Jerusalem, you recognize the whole Jewish story, that is 3,000 years of connection of the Jewish people to their homeland. And this is why I think it's so important. And I don't know if I'll manage during my term, but Israel's policy is that all foreign embassies will be located in Jerusalem. And I was very happy when I was celebrating the historic moment that the American embassy moved to Jerusalem. And I really hope that sometime in the future, we will have a British embassy in Jerusalem.
Amen. Thank you very much indeed. Just a reminder that on Sunday evening at 8 o'clock, I will be in discussion, which is Yomrush Line itself. I will be in discussion with Nadia Cohen, the widow of Eli Cohen, our man in Damascus. You've got a couple of days to watch the film or to read his biography. And he devoted his life to serving Israeli interests at a very, very difficult time, and was executed in May 1965. And she is still campaigning for his body to be returned, his remains to be returned to Israel. So please join us for what should be a very moving discussion then. Ambassador, everyone, I wish you all good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Rabbi Lawrence. It was a pleasure. Thank you for everyone for being with me tonight. Thank you.